Hey everyone, this is Alex USA Days, and here I'm with Jason Huggins, the creator of Selenium, Appium, and a lot of cool things online. So we're going to talk about his new project a little bit and dive into past a little bit and talk about Selenium and other stuff. So good to see you, Jason. How are you?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
All right. So just a little bit about yourself, maybe like a little intro if people are not familiar who you are.
Uh, right. So I'm Jason Huggins. I'm the starter of various projects. Um, the greatest hits version is Selenium Appium. Um, I guess some other things. I started Sauce Labs. I was the co-founder, CTO of that. That was in 2008. Um, in 2015, I started a robotics company. I've been doing that for the last 10 years. That's called Tapster. Um, Other greatest hits things. In 2013, I was pulled into the tech search team to help Obama fix his healthcare.gov website. That was
I've read
fun.
that story. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was crazy. Uh, and then recently, I started the Vibium project, right? And that is either it feels like from the reaction on the internet, people either like love it or hate it. I think as far as the attention that it's gotten.
One
So
one of the
it's kind of a lightning rod of attention that I've gotten. Probably that's an echo of all the attention that AI related stuff in general
yep.
has gotten. Um, and sorry, I'm kind of rambling here for a second, but I won't. But in the last month specifically, there has been kind of a thing, if you follow this on the social media stuff, that a lot of, what do you want to call it, literally graybeards of the industry who were AI skeptics have kind of tipped to being kind of like, wow, this stuff is good. This is like literally like there's headlines like literally Linus Torvalds vibe codes. That was like the headline I think in the last week, where a whole bunch of AI skeptics are now kind of like
Getting on
not
board.
skeptics anymore, and I'm of that group of people that I think is just like the last 2 years I've been kind of like, someone else will figure it out for testing and all this stuff like that. And then somewhere in the last year, we can go into more details on that, where I kind of got, um, you know, like I saw these tools. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah,
Yeah.
this is definitely whatever I was skeptical about. Um, it doesn't seem rational to be skeptical about it anymore.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of AI future ahead of us.
Yeah.
So some of the things that I've, I guess, deviating from the questions, but from what you started talking about, funny posts written online like Vibium reviews that were clearly generated by like Chat GPT without the product even being out there is just hilarious. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah. I did not, some people accused me of running some kind of weird guerrilla campaign where I was like paying people to do this. Like I'm not a fan of the AI slop post created things. Because it's like I think it's doing more harm than good. And also I would rather read people's actual impressions of stuff um than just what AI thinks I did. Because then it's just not helpful, right?
yeah.
Anyway, but yeah,
So I I know about Selenium and I've been using Selenium. I've been in QA field for 10, 12 more years. So like I was there when the whole thing kind of started and
yeah,
but I didn't know the story really well. And at some point
yeah,
I met Shane Evans on Game Dev and we had a talk on this channel. And he said, and I don't know if that's true or not, he said he was somehow related to Selenium project and he said that Selenium was named Selenium because there was a paid enterprise Mercury automation, and then you came up with the name Selenium just because Selenium is an antidote for Mercury. Is that true?
yeah. I joke that I accidentally named it. I'll try to make this version of the story short. But actually, the funny thing is, the Selenium project was actually named in this room. This is like my office for last 18 years. It was then my son's room, and now he's off of college, so it's kind of sort of like the office again. But way back when, there was a desk sitting right there, and my wife is still mad at me for this. I spent about a half a day writing the email where Selenium was named, but it was a dad joke that took some research. And so like, what does that mean? It doesn't make any sense. So I was just a developer at ThoughtWorks in Chicago, and we're making a time and expense system, and there weren't any good testing tools for this because we're doing a lot of JavaScript stuff. That's a whole story into itself. Like JavaScript was notoriously hard to test, right? So someone said you shouldn't even use JavaScript. I'm like, no, we should use it because it's cool, but there's no testing tool. So let's go create a testing tool. So we created a testing tool, right? It was just a classic mother of invention kind of a thing, right? I was unaware at the time. The context is I was unaware because I was just a developer, not that many years out of college even, that there was a testing industry, that there was books, there was professionals, there were conferences. I didn't know actually any of the players, that there was a testing industry. I didn't know who the players were. I knew nothing. All I knew is that I had a testing problem. I had these buttons kept breaking on these browsers. That was it, right? So we at ThoughtWorks, this is also an interesting time period. Sorry, I'm over answering the question, but setting up the context. Brett Petticord recently joined the project, joined the company, and Brett Petticord is famous. He started the Water project, web testing in Ruby, WATIR. He had just joined, and also ThoughtWorks at the time was kind of like the renaissance of agile programming or agile methodology, right? Agile probably before it took on kind of, now it's more notorious and more of a pejorative, but like when Agile was cool and all the books were written, and Martin Fowler was like, he joined just a couple of years prior as the chief scientist, and he was writing books about XP, and it was a crazy time to be there. I think even like the first CI server, everyone uses GitHub Actions now, but this first like CI server was called Cruise Control, and that was created at ThoughtWorks. All kinds of stuff. Actually, that leads to the story. So a CI server is nothing unless it runs the tests, right? Like, and tests are really nothing unless there's a CI server that runs them. So CI servers and test automation are almost like two peas in a pod, or chocolate and peanut butter, whatever your metaphor is, right? And ThoughtWorks at the time was most famous for the CI server, Cruise Control, whatever. So two things kind of happened. One, Brett Petticord comes to me and says, hey, I heard you're making a testing tool. That's kind of cool. And he says, I think this probably has the potential to go after Mercury, like to kill Mercury, I think was his phrase. And I had no idea what he was talking about. Literally, like, what is Mercury? So Google was also kind of a new thing around. So I spent this is the half a day of like, I'm on Google, like Mercury, what is Mercury testing tool? What is it? Like, oh, Mercury Interactive. They make a thing called WinRunner and Quick Test Pro. Got it. Okay. So now I'm just thinking I need to come up with like a dad joke to reply to him. It's like, oh, okay.
What killed Mercury?
Well, yeah, like I was actually Googling around for the cure for mercury poisoning, because that's the only thing I knew about mercury related. I found a quack doctor, dentist. I hope that isn't like slander or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, that it was this whole thing about if you have mercury amalgam dental fillings, you can't remove them because that could kind of trigger like asbestos removal. Like you don't want to go after it and cause more damage. So what you can do, instead of removing the mercury amalgam, you can take selenium supplements, because there's this chemistry equation where selenium counteracts the effect of mercury in the body. That was this. There's probably some scientific paper somewhere where that kind of sort of is true, and this person just ran with it, kind of like a lot of misinformation on the internet. And I thought that was just kind of funny, because it was clearly on the surface kind of like the rantings of a lunatic. But I figured like, oh, well, hey, Brett, as a joke, like if you really want to go after mercury or cure mercury poisoning or whatever, you should take these selenium supplements. That was it. That was the dad joke. And it took me a whole half day to just say that. And whatever, that was it. And then the second part, actually, which was the longer part of the email, I went on about how, okay, right now, currently the name of the project is called JSFT, JavaScript Functional Tester, which was kind of a riff on JS Unit. Or jokingly, it was like Jason's Functional Tester, but JSFT, that was the name in the repo at the time. I knew that was a horrible name. It was like a placeholder. So I was arguing, after my little dad joke about like you should take selenium supplements, why the name of the project should be called Check Engine. And I was like really making this serious, because cruise control is the thing that ThoughtWorks is famous for. We're going with a car theme here. It's brilliantly punny because it's an engine that checks things. So but also it could be like a check engine light on your car. So if the tests go green, the check engine light is green, or it's off or whatever. Or if the tests go red, the check engine light is red. So I was like gearing up for cruise control and check engine. That's the ThoughtWorks kind of like world domination plan, and blah 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 blah. Right? I got no reply from Brett about the check engine or the Selenium thing at all. This is why I joke that I accidentally named it. So what happened is I forgot about the thing, right? Because I'm writing dad joke manifestos all the time, right? Apparently. A week or two later, someone comes to my office and says, I can you show me a demo of your Selenium project? And I'm like, I had truly no idea what they're talking about. And I had to like reverse engineer, and they didn't know why I didn't know what they were talking about. So I had to like figure it out, like, oh, I guess this is related to the email that I sent to Brett. That might have also gotten forwarded to, I think, or I think actually he might have been on the email, Paul Hammett. He was the head of open source at ThoughtWorks. And so I think somewhere around that time, we were also like putting together like a what do you call it? Apparently, I think in ThoughtWorks history, I might have been like one of the few people to actually ask permission to open source a project. Everyone else just kind of did it. So in my kind of letting the management chain know about this project, I think one of the things, without them telling me, they just saw my email like, yeah, Selenium, that's a great name. Internally, they were having tons of conversations without talking to me about the Selenium project. And so a week or so later, anyway, I finally caught on to it. And I think maybe I don't remember this, but I'm sure Paul must have talked to me and said, yeah, we're not calling it check engine. Because I think it was that context of, if you're in the testing world and you just saw a Mercury talk or something like that, the Selenium was as a name what had more bite, I guess, to it, more. Anyway, sorry, that's a longer version of
this is great. This is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, the weird thing is, I've never used. I feel bad because like some people can take that. I think it's actually now even in the Wikipedia page. Like Jason Huggins said this very mean thing about like it's killing Mercury. It was never meant to be the name of the project, or like outside of the audience of just the two of Brett and Paul, who I wrote this email to. I didn't intend to really kind of mock Mercury at that level. Like I never actually used, I still to this day, I've never used Quick Test Pro or any Mercury product. I feel bad a little bit. But there's also a certain level of like, now it's kind of like karma, right? Like, so when people take shots at Selenium, now it's 21 years old, I kind of have to like kind of go with it. Cause like, what you can't, if you can't dish it out, or if you can't take it, you shouldn't dish it out. And so there's a certain level of like, it worked in the early days of the Selenium project, and now it's kind of like a humbling thing when people take shots at Selenium. I have to just like, what do you call it? The time is a flat circle. It's a circle of life, whatever you want to call it. Like now, or what's the other phrase? The you either die a hero.
It's
or,
pretty much like karma.
Long. Yeah. But what was the character? Was it Two-Face from Batman? It's like die the hero or live long enough to become the villain.
Yeah.
So this kind of like Selenium is now, and it's like whatever, or I don't know, the villain stage. Anyway, I don't know if this is related to the goatee. There's a certain level of like, it was just kind of a dad joke that just like, and then things kind of got out of control.
You just threw it at the universe, and it just came back with a whole Selenium like for everything.
So there's a little bit of kind of riffing on that. I did that with the Vibium project on the website right now, vibium.com. I'm trying to be a little bit more subtle about it, but then if I call it out, it's not so subtle anymore. But browser automation without the drama. Yeah. That is, if you're going, you have a car metaphor, and then you have apparently a theater metaphor in the other universe of tools, right? You have stagehands and puppeteers and people who write plays and stuff like that. And so the Vibium WebDriver world is basically, we're just going to do all this automation, but without the drama, right? Without the theater part. Anyway, so there's a little bit of a, I'm still workshopping my dad jokes 21 years later. Anyway.
Yeah, so you've mentioned Vibium, so I think we're going to come back to it a little bit more. I just want to ask some other questions. So you said about Selenium that it is in its villain stage, right? So
it's going to be like the headline.
Right. Well, that's what it is, now, right?
Oh man, yeah, that's your 20-second YouTube short, right?
Right. So,
oh man.
So, what is the future of Selenium? Is it gonna continue, or it will evolve? Will it become on pair with Playwright to compete? Playwright recently surpassed Selenium. Selenium's still big with like big projects in banking industry and like big corporations, but all the new stuff is pretty much either Cypress or Playwright. So what is the future for Selenium now? What do you think?
Right. So I've been talking, so I have an interesting relationship with the Selenium project, right? So I always have to be careful. Like I'm not like, I haven't done all of it, right? And that was true for a long time, right? So I started the project, got couple years in, merged with with Simon Stewart's WebDriver project. That was like 2009, right? So everything since 2009 has been like, if we didn't, like, my last massive significant contribution, right, was convincing Simon to join the project. Although there's some echoes of that, like the Selenium IDE recorder, that's probably closer to the original version of Selenium. There's also a lot of behind the scenes stuff I've done, whatever. But so I'm not day to day on the project today. That's the headline. But I try to, what's my phrase? I try to like nudge asteroids out of harm's way. If anything, there's a certain level of like, I'm the keeper of campfire stories of what it was like at the beginning, and there's certain things that I'm like paying attention to, like that we should do at an industry level, and I try to make sure that like we're doing those things or not doing those things or whatever. Anyway, Selenium started as a testing tool. The metaphor, I think, and actually I had a very long conversation with one particular very active Selenium committer. This is like only a month-old conversation, so I don't want to out him or out that conversation, but this is kind of where things are going. Selenium started as an actual full-fledged testing tool. Metaphorically, it was a truck that had all of the parts, including cup holders and all the things you would expect in a truck. Over time, but especially this accelerated after the merger with WebDriver, that, you know, for the last 10 years, it was on this path towards like being the W3C standard and all the standards process that go through that, like really like very focused, professionalized, like making sure all the browser vendors are coordinating, right? Like making sure that core protocol, the engine, if you will, was like good. That, I think, came at the expense of making a good truck. I hope this metaphor makes sense.
Yep.
But over years, effectively, the Selenium project moved from being a full-fledged truck company to being an engine company.
Yep.
And then a lot of the criticism that comes at it from the outside is that, like, at its core, Selenium is still a good engine, and a lot of all the browser vendors and testing tool companies, they use the Selenium engine under the hood.
Are you talking about specifically like WebDriver as an engine?
The WebDriver itself, and then now recently the BiDi protocol, right? Like if you look at a lot of testing tools that even like market against Selenium under the hood, they actually use Selenium under the hood, right? Like the actual bringing up a browser. I won't name names, right? But there's a lot of commercial tools that they actively market against, like say Selenium sucks, but also use it as a dependency, right? Because they're doing some AI fancy stuff on top of it, right? So it's it was always a little frustrating, but they had a valid criticism in the sense that, like, as Selenium project moved more towards just focusing on the core engine, its truckness, it's started to be obviously kind of like not great, because that was no longer the focus of the project. Also, to be fair, the Selenium committers would say, like, look, we're like a ragtag bunch of volunteers, and we do what we can. And we kind of, it's like a classic kind of open source argument. Like, we kind of focus on the things that are like easier to do. Like a headless, like core engine is easy versus all of the kind of design, developer experience stuff you would expect from the outside. So that left a wedge and a huge opening for any other tool like a Playwright or a Puppeteer to come in and just be a better truck, right? So what happened is, let's say 20 years ago, it was okay to be a, like, what do you call it? Do one thing tool. We would just say, like, people would complain that like Selenium didn't have a built-in test runner or like a dashboard or all kinds of stuff, and say, like, well, oh yeah, well then you go use this dashboard or this test runner tool, you put these together. That was fine. But let's say the new generation of kids these days want a very batteries included, all just ready to go
absolutely
thing. There's an old quote from, I think it's James Barksdale. He was like one of the founder or co-founder of Netscape. And he said there's only two business models in the world, period, in technology. There's bundling and unbundling. Like, that was it. I think I forgot what he was talking in terms of, well, the browser stuff, but you can talk about it in cable. Cable, now we're in a unbundling. You have a separate app for every streaming service, and now someone in 5 years is going to come around and give you one bundled thing, able to call it cable, whatever, right? Like, it's just bundling and unbundling. So Playwright, if one just observation, what is that they bundled a whole bunch of stuff together that, like, Python calls this batteries included, right? Like just a one good package of everything. They rolled their own test runner. They incorporate video recording, a whole bunch of stuff. They did a lot of developer experience things, and so they basically made a better truck. Selenium was a good truck, 21 years ago, but over time they kind of metaphorically, took the foot off the accelerator, I suppose. Made a good engine, but didn't make a good truck. And Playwright makes a better truck,
Yeah.
right? And I think that the and the market's kind of responding to that, right? There's also a bunch of internal stuff you could talk about, like literally the lower level protocol. Oh man, there's a whole bunch of different market dynamics on how like the shift from Selenium Playwright happens. But anyway, I'll just
I
leave it there
think
for a second.
any product at some point will become kind of open to other products getting in, and even like a simple example was Playwright. So it has a bunch of different reporters. One of them is HTML reporters, and let's say I like have like thousands of tests running, and my management says, "Hey, your report is good, but I need those like charts, pie charts, and like graphs. Can you get that?" And there's no native thing for that. You have to get something from somewhere. And I posted a question on Playwright, like support community forum. Like it got a bunch of likes about the pie charts, and the response was like, "Why do we need it? Like you have HTML report, and that's it." And they closed the thread. So I mean, someone gonna get in and have a reporter that shows pie charts that it's easy to show to the management because there's thousands of tests running, and for them, it's very important to have data out of the box, right? So
right.
So
yeah, I think so. The attitude just on like what do you call it? Microsoft in general. So it ended up being like kind of logically a good home. Microsoft has a really good just over time focus on developer experience. Like their developer tools are really good. So Microsoft ended up being a good home, a natural home for the Playwright team because test automation is hard, and like it's nice that a big company finally cared about the developer experience, specifically at test automation, because for a long time test automation was like the last place where companies cared about making good developer experience, right? Sorry, there's one other thing that I kind of want to say as far as like where kind of like why things have to play the way they played out. Selenium's kind of big effort at the beginning was cross-browser testing. Like, so it was a very kind of go wide and have a lowest common denominator of like support for that. That was like literally the reason we created the project. Like Selenium, being able to test in Firefox and Internet Explorer. Chrome didn't even exist at the time. So it was a very kind of broad, what do you call it? Horizontal in focus project. Meanwhile, you have Chrome developer tools, then Puppeteer, and then Playwright. That was Chrome only, and that came from the Chrome team, and that was a very kind of vertically oriented, just one browser. That's all they cared about. Ultimately, they expanded to more browsers. But what happened over time is that, let's say in 2004 to 2008, the most important thing was cross-browser testing, making sure that all the browsers worked across the board. But as the industry shifted to basically just only caring about Google Chrome, because it got to market share that basically Internet Explorer had, like 80% market share. I forget what it's up to now. Then at some point, just Selenium's core mission of being cross-browser lowest common denominator, no one really cared. They just wanted a really good way to drive Google Chrome. And the Chrome Dev Tools Protocol, Puppeteer, and Playwright was the best way technically, but also because like that came from the vendor, right? So there's kind of like this horizontal importance of cross-browser, cross-industry coordination versus just I only care about Chrome. When we just only cared about one browser, it was easy to ignore any of the benefits. Because basically, people didn't care about the benefits that Selenium cared about from day one. I think that might be changing in the future. Like again, there's pendulum swings. Time is a flat circle. Like things come in fashion and out of fashion. But Playwright basically like timed it perfectly. But also they had the wind at their back of basically the entire industry just kind of consolidating on only really caring about Chrome. So at that point, people didn't mind that Chrome Dev Tools and Puppeteer was a one browser only kind of a thing. Of course, they fixed that. That now is cross browser, but at the beginning there, it's like people just like, I only care about Chrome anyway. No problem.
Yep.
Anyway, that was my other little thing that I wanted to put out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So another thing that I want to talk about, and it's also a pretty big project that carries a lot of testing on its shoulders, Appium.
Yeah,
Native and mobile testing is a huge share, more half of the user. Even like we're no longer in the PC era; it's all mobile native devices. There's web
right.
mobile, but there's also a lot of native stuff. And I didn't work with APM much, but I do
Yeah,
read the complaints of the community, and the question is like, we all have APM, but how come there's nothing better yet? Because APM is great, but it's like best out of the worst. Because if you compare with web automation, it's so much easier, and APM is just like
right,
try to configure it first and then run it. So why
right.
there's nothing like a Playwright for native mobile testing?
I mean, someone will crack that, but I think there. This was one of the questions that you asked. I was doing some research on this before this, but I think it's actually related to what I just said, right? Like web was easier to automate because most people only care about Chrome. So if we had a, excuse me, if we had a situation where, so yeah, if you look at the charts across the board, across the planet, there is now more people are on mobile than they are on desktop, right?
Yep.
So that's true. So you would think like, okay, why? Yeah, you ask your question, why isn't there a player? The problem is, um, iPhone and Android don't have the the same kind of,
Good
what do you want to call
protocol
it?
to kind of configure and run
No,
tests.
no, they don't have the market share that Chrome does on desktop,
Yeah.
right? If let's say, I mean, so iPhone is like, effectively like the default in the US, and then Android is effectively the default
Everywhere
everywhere
else.
else except the
Yeah.
United States. I guess you could make the argument that um I'm trying to make it like a market share argument. Because Chrome has 80%, you only care about Chrome, and so you just use whatever is like the most native thing to Chrome, and that was like CDP, Puppeteer, Playwright, right? Came from the
Yep.
team. In this particular case, it's a lot more fractured on the Appium side. Like iPhone is kind of entrenched in the US, Android's entrenched in the rest of the world. The platform, uh, it's just kind of a messier story, right? Uh, the when Appium started, the Apple and Google did not have really good native testing tools, which is kind of like why Selenium existed in the first place, why Appium existed. Like the platform vendors consistently don't care about testing, and so but testers do, and so Appium filled that gap of making a testing tool when the platform vendors don't care. Eventually, a couple of years later, they do care, and so now you've got effectively kind of a stalemate. You have Appium if you want to do like one test across the board. You then have the native testing tool on iOS, and you have the native testing tool on Android. Is it Espresso? I forgot what the latest one is, or if it's UI Automator. Sorry, my
Yep.
names are all jumbled in my head. But what I suspect is happening is that you either are using React Native, and so it's really just a mobile, you're only really testing a web app that's like been made into a native app, and you're just using kind of like web tools to test it.
Hmm.
React Native would be how I would be making a mobile app today. Or you're making an actual full-fledged iOS app, and then you're only using the iOS tool from Apple to test that. You're not using Appium. Or you're an Android developer and you're only using the Android stack, right? So it's almost like you got into this weird thing where you're either a web developer and you're using web testing tools, and maybe it's actually in Playwright, like it's kind of like you're just using that
Emulators.
or the
Yeah.
native thing. And so Appium is in this kind of weird spot. It feels kind of like there's an equivalent project for making like a desktop app, like Wix widgets, Wix Windows, where it's like um, it's there and you can make a cross-platform app out of it. But if you wanted like the best experience, you throw it away and you go to the native thing. Um, I'm just going around and around and around, but basically saying it's just a messier situation. It makes logical sense that there should be a playwright for it. I wouldn't be surprised if like secretly at the big tech companies, they're working on it. They just
Yeah.
haven't released it yet. But they all
Maybe.
have their own kind of incentives, right?
Yeah.
Google doesn't have an incentive to support iOS very well. Apple likewise. The React Native team at Meta probably only cares about like
Yep.
like mobile things. So you look at the incentives of all the companies that are in there, and then you kind of see like, oh, that's why it's kind of a mess.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's interesting. So no interest from the business that creates apps per se, not as much to have cross-platform, but definitely a lot of interest from
There,
everyone else. So they go into the Appium if they
there
don't.
is.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead. Yep.
yeah. If they don't want to get a specialized tool for every native device, they just try to do Appium, and Appium does it best, kind of as it can.
It's kind of like the best worst, right?
Yeah.
There was one thing that I was working on. This is kind of like Vibium at the end. I'm at the kind of end of this 2-year journey. But 2 years ago, I was for the last 10 years, I've been making mobile robots, and that's just mobile touchscreen. So I've been doing mobile automation for the last 10 years. Some people think I was like just retired and on a farm or something like that for 10 years, but no, I was doing mobile automation with robots. And when I started kind of figuring out I might pivot back towards more kind of normie automation, my head was still wrapped around mobile. And the specific thing I have, the latest version of my robot, it's actually not a robot with arms and legs. It's like a Raspberry Pi or equivalent. You plug into a phone, and it presents itself as a mouse or keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a fake mouse or keyboard. And I had the specific thing that I was kind of going for here was noticing that Appium is really a pain in the butt to install and set up, right? But if you take an off-the-shelf Android phone and plug in a mouse and keyboard, and if you have a circuit board pretending to be a mouse and keyboard, that works immediately. Nothing to install, you just do it, right? So that was like the kernel of this idea of like making a version of Appium that was like installed on a Raspberry Pi Zero for like $5. So I would like pre-configure the SD card so it's just like ready to go, like a Docker container. And then a little cable you plug into your Android phone. There's one setting you have to do on iOS to do this. You plug it in, and then boom, you're up and running with mobile development. This was the idea that I had, and I was working on this. And I think I'm still kind of puzzled by this. Across the board, mobile traffic is like mobile usage for just your average user is the majority. But I think for developers, though, most developers are not mobile app developers. They're like most developers are web developers, and then they have to support desktop and mobile web. And so I was making this very specific mobile testing tool, and I kind of kept running into this brick wall of like people not really caring. Like
Right.
people complain about like the Appium setup, but not to the point where they're actively seeking out like interesting solutions for it. So they'll grumble through and do it, but it just feels like there's a lot more focus on web and mobile web and native app testing stuff. Just kind of, it's one of those things of like, if it feels like the vendors don't care about making better, it's almost a reflection of also developers themselves also not caring to the point where it's like they're truly mad about it, I guess. Like, there's this old meme of like from the Futurama cartoon where the character is like, shut up and take my money. People are like that for right now for AI tools or web tools, but they're not like that for mobile testing tools. So the second you have basically like an army of angry people or happy people with wallet of cash saying, shut up and take my money, mobile testing tools won't get fundamentally better, or unless some brave person just makes it better anyway, without the hordes of people just trying to throw cash at you, I guess.
I think that would be an interesting solution. I don't know if it's possible at all. So you mentioned like an external interface, but if you can have like a native app version of Appium that mimics keyboards as an emulator and a mouse and just installs on the device and becomes your like essentially installed automator for everything you have on that phone, kind of a thing. That would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's interesting projects. But usually like they're just doing one little thing. Like one is like really good for Android, but they didn't do it for iOS. Or one has a really good developer interface. Anyway, it's kind of it's a bit of a mess. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's some team, probably at Microsoft or Google, Meta, whatever. You then also have the there's like another kind of, what do you call it? My graybeard, what do you call it? Looking at the industry now that I've seen a bunch of dev cycles. Mobile is so 10 years ago, right? It's like as far as like where you put all your attention, it's now all AI related stuff. And maybe in 6 months, it'll be XR goggles again, right? That's where like the hot, like, so I don't know, like pontificating on this stuff. It's like, if there was a playwright for mobile moment, it's going to be more it's kind of like where the hype cycle is, and where like where companies are like wanting to invest new stuff because mobile is so 10 years ago. It would be something AI related or something XR, VR, AR, glass related,
I
right?
think Joe Rogan and Elon Musk on a podcast with Joe Rogan said something that, and I don't know how predictable is that really, but in 5 years plus, we'll have no apps at all. It's all going to be like live stream, live generated by the AI on the devices. So at some point, maybe when we get there, there will be just AI kind of doing the native
This is
automation.
this is a very, I think, a very important question in testing. I boiled this down into I joke if I do a podcast, the name of the podcast will be extending the metaphor. One new metaphor a day or something like that. So in that context, right, if everything gets AI generated on the fly all the time, the metaphor that I use is like my light switch. In 5 years, will my light switch, instead of being a physical switch that I turn on and off, will it be a touchscreen? Granted, that already exists. There are places where like the interfaces into your home, it's already a touchscreen thing, right? And some companies, the thermostats, all that stuff, they're all touchscreen. But in some places, I guess maybe that's the thing. In my house, I still have old school light switches. It does one job. I flip the switch. That's it. And that's kind of easy to rationalize about how long that will last. There's like thousands of hours of, they call it mean time between failure, hardware interfaces. They're a known quantity. They're easy to test. They're easy to know when they're going to fail. You can easily test the functionality. I don't have to worry about an iOS update breaking my light switch. There's certain things that it needs to be a light switch and stay a light switch. It will never not be a light switch. So there's no point for it to be a very brittle stack of software that constantly goes out of date. And yet there's still a lot of people putting touchscreens everywhere, in cars, in planes. Like I've had a lot of crazy conversations over the last 10 years. And it also, even spaceships, basically anything Elon Musk makes, it's all touchscreenified, right? And so why not keep going down that crazy route and make it not just like I downloaded React Native and made a touchscreen interface? Why not just literally every day when you approach the wall to turn on the touchscreen, that's actually a prompt to the latest version of the AI saying, oh, Jason's approaching, his favorite color is blue, and he likes Lego and Transformers. So in the next 3 seconds, present a light switch that is like Lego-y Transformer blue, so he has a very fun user experience when he turns on the light switch. That could totally happen. That's probably already happening in hotel resorts. Some Imagineer at Disney is probably working on that. So your light switches, or every interface in your hotel room, is some kind of like personalized
experience
thing,
yeah.
Right? At the same time, you have safety systems at, I don't know, like in robotics, the big red button that is the kill switch. For either legal purposes or just pragmatic purposes, that will never be a touchscreen, because if all else fails, you're literally hitting a big red freaking button that kills the electricity. That will never, or shouldn't ever, be a touchscreen that is AI generated on the fly. So you have this tension, I think, where if you really lean into the most laziest version of software development, because that's probably a good thing to bet on, is like people not wanting to do any work. So they like just having a prompt generate your user interfaces, that I could see that future being there. At the same time, for legal and practical reasons, you will always have things that are just like locked down and it never changes, right? Except for every 30 years when the manufacturer of the big red switch goes out of business. In testing, though, that has huge implications, because how do we test something that didn't exist 5 seconds ago and will not exist 5 seconds from now? It's purely like magic. A snowflake of a user interface. I don't have a good answer for that. And I'm not sure if anyone really does. I think we're just kind of going to YOLO ourselves through that. I would be suspicious of anyone who says they do have an answer. But there's like, that's a thing. We already have touchscreens like for HVAC systems, like the Nest, or what do you call it? Your thermostats. Yep. Some of those things are, whatever. But I think the car industry kind of is already going through this arc where some car companies are kind of moving back to physical buttons. you're kind of you're seeing this.
Yeah, I've seen the BMW wheel just getting locked jam, trying
Right,
to like turn left every
right.
second, something like that, because of
And
this
this
all the software. Yeah,
and this was part of the early success for Tapster itself. Like our very first plus customer was a car company. This was like right at the beginning of like the touch screenification of everything, and you needed physical button or physical robots to test some of these things, and our robots test touchscreens. Anyway, it's kind of fascinating, but I guess I will suggest that not everything in the universe is going to be an AI generated user interface. Like some things are going to have to just be a light switch,
right.
and that's going to look like the last 20 years of stuff. Like you made it, there's a process, we tested it, we shipped that to the production, and yes, it's running some software stack on a touchscreen, but that like it's on firmware that we don't change
Yep.
literally every time some new person walks up, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Anyway,
Absolutely.
that's my rant.
Yeah, that's great.
on
That's
the
that's great.
future.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so let's go to the Vibium. So now I have a little
Yeah,
story how I found Vibium. So I was just
yeah,
on LinkedIn and I read, I think one of your posts, like you have Vibium going, something like this development for next age automation thing. And I went
yeah.
to the web page and I started reading what it is, and I'm like,
Right,
hold on. And it said on the
right,
web page that you're
right,
trying to put it on a decentralized network, and like
right,
you would use compute powers of all the users there to help you like AI generate tests and tests. I'm like, there's
right.
no corporation ever gonna allow multiple machines access to their like prod or whatever to even provide resources for testing. It's just not gonna happen. So I kind of make a video about it, and you saw it in my feed, and then you responded like, oh, this is like old stuff. Here's the news.
And that's how we
Yeah,
that's how we fast forward. That's how we got here, right?
yeah. And then like, okay, so what's the new stuff? Are we doing blockchain, Bitcoin, Vibium thing or not?
I have a lot of ideas, and the trick is to just get them all out of my brain and some of them into existence and see what happens, right? If they don't take off, fine. At least I got it out of my head. So Vibium is no longer, for now, maybe this decentralized idea. If anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, uh, the website for Vibium.ai up until like last month was this kind of proof of concept for what I called it like Airbnb or Uber for phones. So you're right. No one, sorry. And the basic idea would be someone on the other side of the planet plugs in their phone, um, and then overnight web tests or mobile tests get run on that phone, and then they wake up in the morning and then they use their phone, or like that's kind of crazy, but it's kind of like getting in a stranger's car, staying at a stranger's apartments. It's kind of like using a stranger's phone to do testing. This was kind of the idea, right? Probably a great idea for 10, 15 years ago, like when Uber for whatever was a popular thing. But the I'll get back to what Vibium is, but where it started was this idea, but it really specifically started with one question: was if I had started Sauce Labs all over again today, how would I do that? And the thought was, well, if I was going to do that, maybe I would focus on mobile and not web, because mobile is where most traffic is. Things so like, okay, it's just mobile, and then to do a credible like mobile cloud of devices. Let's say you need like a 2,000 phones. That's a good kind of starter cloud. That's bigger than like a local cloud. So like, if you do the math on like brand new iPhones, if I'm hoping I'm doing the math here, like $1,000 per phone times 2,000 phones. If I got the math right, that's $2 million, right?
Yep.
Hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of figured like, well, why would I go, who in the world? I don't have $2 million. And would an investor just give me $2 million that I would then give right back to Apple if I wanted to start a new mobile cloud, right? So it's like, how do I create a mobile cloud of 2,000 mobile phones without spending $2 million buying those phones?
Right.
The idea just kind of fell out of the air when it was like, oh, the answer is don't buy 2,000 phones. Like, oh, everyone I have an iPhone, or I have a phone in my pocket. You have a phone. Everyone has a phone. They're all, and a lot of people have a drawer of old phones.
Yeah.
So I started kind of pulling the thread on this, like how many phones exist in the world?
I think there was this idea, was the iHype when the compute got too expensive. Maybe I think I don't know where it is at development right now, but let's decentralize it. Everyone can add to the compute.
Yeah. So I came out of this from I just wanted to create like a new cloud, and I kind of backed myself into how you would do that. And so I had this idea, and you're right. This is like I called it stranger danger. There's the if I'm a developer, why would I trust a test result on some stranger's phone? They might be mucking with the results. All on the flip side, if I'm a person, why would I trust a developer running code on my phone? That's also like a great idea to like get bad things happening. So I did a lot of research on like how you could do that, and also like it is kind of a solvable problem in two different ways. You can run like cloud companies let strangers run code. Like there's kind of like you put things in containers and virtual machines. There's a way to protect it. The other thing is you can solve it socially. You can get into strangers' cars. You can, as a stranger, you can go rent a room from in some building as long as you like.
There's a contract, and then there's monetary incentive. So
you could do background checks, deposits, all kinds of stuff, right? It's specifically if you're a company and you want to test on 1,000 phones in the world. I was also thinking about this in terms of it still makes sense from a production monitoring point of view. Like, let's say you're any company. Let's I don't know, Google Meet for this, for that matter. We're using this for this interface. Google shipped some software and it's running on my computer. I'm a stranger as far as they're concerned, but it still kind of worked, right? I was thinking there would be some kind of way where you could maybe run some kind of test, like maybe just web tests, or the latest version of Android actually supports Linux containers. So like you could run a Linux sandboxed app test, whatever. They're all different kind of ways to think about it. But the other kind of thought I had for this was, regardless of how much testing you do in the lab, if you want to know that your app works on an iPhone, on Verizon, in Times Square, the best way to get that signal is to literally test on an iPhone, on Verizon, in Times Square. There is still some kind of production monitoring use case that is useful, even with all of the stranger danger aspects of things. So it's kind of like spending a lot of time meditating on this. A lot of time talking to people about this. I was even thinking like, how do you pay for it? That's how I actually got backed into learning about Bitcoin and Lightning Network, because if you're doing a global network and you're trying to figure out how to incentivize people to put their phone on the network, I had this idea of like figuring out the math of, oh, well, maybe they put their phone on the network for 8 hours and they wake up and make a couple of dollars, their coffee money for the day, and figuring out how the economics could work and doing price comparisons to the existing. I was doing all this stuff and kind of was back into, oh my gosh, I'm making a worldwide Uber for testing backed by the Lightning Network. It became like this Tron of hype words, but it was like, but I think this could work. My big problem though was that no one cared and no one wanted it. That was like the big headline from all this story. And in the process of trying to pitch this to people, this global network, getting them up, telling them why Bitcoin Lightning Network actually makes sense here. I'm not just trying to pitch. The people I joke with, like, oh, you're just trying to make a Hugs coin, right? Like, no, I'm trying to pay for this global network. The feedback I got was, that's great, crazy idea. You're crazy. I only care about test maintenance. Test maintenance is the number one problem I have. I do not have I wish I had access to an iPhone in Times Square or Australia or wherever you're talking about. And so this is now over the last year, from like April over to the summer, I started thinking like, okay, I give up. I'm going to stop figuring out how to get access to 2,000 phones and distribute them and get them paid by the Lightning, all the crazy stuff. I'm just going to meditate on the things that people actually care about. Is like, I just care about test maintenance just on one computer, right? And over the summer, that's where I felt like that was the number one thing. How would I solve the test maintenance problem if I was going to get out of what I was kind of pivoting away from what I was doing with Tapster, where it was just selling robots for very specific R&D labs. I want to do something kind of a little bit more normie. At the same time, I started playing around with these AI tools. Specifically, this was right around when I think in the last year, agentic coding we kind of understood what that meant. Specifically, the two tools I started playing around with, Lovable.dev is the website, Lovable, and also Claude Code. I forgot exactly when the first release of Claude Code was. And that's also kind of taking some ideas from open code before that. But let's say last spring to like between April and June, that's when I kind of noticed the AI dev loop where you could spring into existence from scratch a brand new app with just a couple of prompts. With Lovable is a little bit more kind of newbie friendly, and then Claude Code is a little bit more like professional developer stuff. like with Claude Code, you can go a little bit nerdier on telling it exactly what kind of unit tests you want it to write, and kind of you can give it a little bit more kind of meat on the bones, I guess, if you will, like specification stuff. I started thinking like, wow, these tools are really, really getting good. And so I started kind of thinking, if all I did was focus, it was kind of clear that like back in June, like the Claude Code way of doing development is the future. But all these platforms have kind of a testing problem in a similar way that like doing web development 20 years ago, there was a gaping hole in how you would do testing. Or when everything was doing cloud, like when you were doing mobile, there was a gaping hole for testing. Appium came out of that. Or if you're doing cloud computing and all the platforms are moving to cloud, there was no obvious testing platform in the cloud computing cycle. Like, GitHub was in the cloud now. You had CI systems in the cloud, but there was no testing. So it felt like, oh, history is repeating itself. Claude Code and Lovable are clearly the future, but the testing part of it is like an open question. And so I think it was like two things converging of like, oh, my whole shtick is doing a testing thing for like a new workflow or a new platform, and kind of being a little bit more humble here, which probably people would be surprised that, whatever. You're not supposed to talk about how humble you are, but it was humbling experience to kind of talk about my crazy network idea and no one caring. And so I had to like meditate on the test maintenance is the problem to be solved in the future. And there's this gaping hole in this new way of doing development. Yeah. So I kind of, if I can focus on those two things, I might be onto something. And so I packaged that up into a Y Combinator application. I posted my founder video thinking I still had 4 months to maybe potentially still figure it out. And then a lot of people found that video, and then everything got crazy. People, that's how you found it, right?
Yep.
But the other part of that was I made a prototype version of my network idea using Lovable as an excuse to play around with this like agentic dev loop tools. I also made several other applications. That's the one that was like kind of the most famous one that I linked to a public website. And I never got that to the point where it was actually operational. It was like just enough of a use, like a proof of concept that you can kind of get the look and feel of like how I would want the dashboards for the global network to kind of work. But that was also kind of a, in your YC application, they asked for like, hey, do you have a working prototype? And without really, because I only took 15 minutes to apply, I like, oh, well, I have a demo for this like older version of this idea. I'll just slam that in there and see what happens. And the other thing is, like, a lot of people don't know, this is the third, and now I would argue final time I applied to Y Combinator. Got rejected now 3 for 3. I never got an interview. So I was convinced at this point, this is like last August, no one was going to look at my demo website, let it go in my application. I'll still put it out there anyway. 2025 is all about like firing all the fireworks, just kind of having no F's to give anymore. I'm just going to like stop living in accidental stealth mode and just like be out there. And so I posted it, and I didn't realize that, if anything, I thought if someone saw that, people would be wishing me well, saying, hey, good luck with your application. I didn't realize that bloggers were going to read read the transcript of my founder video, think I actually was just launching a product, and then reverse engineer to say like, oh, that's linked to this URL, and then let me do a deep dive on this proof of concept.
And then they feed it to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT generates some crazy theories of what's coming. Like, yeah.
And it's all broken, and all the links are like, I was like, there's another thing that's like out in parallel, which is probably not the greatest thing to admit from being a testing professional, but there is this essay out there called "Worse is Better." There's also a phrase that was kind of an inside joke on the Selenium project. It's like a embarrassment-driven development. You put something out there, and then the things that you end up fixing in the next release are basically the things that are the most embarrassing. And so you're kind of embarrassed into fixing those things. So there's almost like a reason to put something that's actually purposely a little crappy that's out there, and then the thing that people like make fun of. You have to. This is
like
kind of
like user-driven development.
Yeah. And so like I knew that demo, one, I didn't think people would look at it, but then two, I knew it wasn't polished. There's another quote from, I think it was like Reid Hoffman. I forgot exactly who said this, but it's like, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of the thing that you put out in the world, you shipped too late. Like, there's always going to be some rough stuff. These are all uncomfortable little quotes when you're in the context of testing. I think a lot of professionals you would kind of look at it like we're making the altimeter, we're making all the important dials for a plane. And you don't really want your altimeter to be some kind of like made up thing that was just, manufactured
for
5 minutes ago.
testing it's hard because okay, if we're working on some play toy, it's totally fine. But if we're building a plane,
Right.
we actually need to build it right the first time.
Right. And so there's a thing that's like, I think the people who, this is like a tricky thing because there's going to be people who watch or are going to be like hate watching this, like who hate Selenium and just want to hear me say stupid stuff. There's going to be people who actually like Selenium and they're going to be like, wow, no, Selenium works, and they're annoyed why people don't, whatever. But I remember I still have a lot of memory of the impressions that people were coming to my office, besides asking about the Selenium project, also saying like, wow, Selenium sucks for all these different reasons, like back in 2004. And they were not wrong. There were so many things that it could not do. And we just cut incrementally. I think the trick is, as long as you get better like every day, like I think people underestimate the power of
Agile
incremental improvement. Yeah, literally, it's literally agile development and literally incremental improvement. And so if you are risk averse and want the thing, like if lives are dependent on it, yes, pay attention to what I'm working on, but don't like whatever. But in the early days of all invention, it's one of those things of like, it's just things are messy on day one. And I just kind of like embrace that because I know that things will get better. Some people would look at that saying like that's unprofessional. Like, so you have to be careful. Like when you put something, a V1 out, some people have asked me like, hey, is Vibium ready for production? Could I use this for some more important stuff? And I would say like, hey, hold on. We just put out V1. It's a brand new project. You really shouldn't like depend on it, rely on it for like, mission critical.
Yep.
Like I would not want NASA using this for like a lunar lander next year.
Yeah.
But hey, 5-10 years from now, like, like who knows how incrementally awesome this is going to be, right? There's also a certain kind of time for experimentation and messiness and figuring out what it needs to be at the early points of the project. Once you've kind of like dialed it in, then over time, you're really doing a lot of polish, a lot of sandpapering, metaphorically, of all of the things. And at that point, it really is something you can rely on.
So,
right?
yeah.
So there's kind of like my part of the projects are figuring out what the spec needs to be, kind of figuring out what it's like the manifesto,
Right.
like figuring out the right combination of things, experimenting with a bunch of stuff, getting it mostly like getting that first version, like kind of like, aha, I think this is the thing we can kind of grow. Like, what do you call it? The kernel of the crystal that you can grow you can grow the rest of the thing out of.
So from what I understand now, you moved from this decentralized network idea into a new version, better Selenium 2.0, or just Selenium that's going to be perfect kind of a thing. Right.
Right. I mean, so there is a difference between like where we want the project to be and where it is today, right? But there is kind of talking with the actual, what I mentioned earlier, the conversation with the Selenium committer. As the Selenium project focuses more on just being a good core engine, it's the W3C standard process. Now it's the WebDriver BiDi process, like making sure that is working. It's harder for the project to also, if that's an engine, it's harder for the project to be a truck, right?
Yeah.
Like the project is moving away from being a truck company. I would argue so in that environment, Vibium is a truck company. We are a batteries included testing tool that will hopefully, that basically Playwright has set the bar of expectations. So Vibium has to be as good, and the expectations that people have from a testing tool, Vibium has to meet that level. That's the goal. And that's no longer the goal of the Selenium project. If it was, the people would say like after the WebDriver merger, which was now a long time ago, 2009, Selenium has basically been in kind of towards a path of kind of reducing the scope of the project. Like if you even go to the website, Selenium's site says we automate browsers. That's it. There's kind of like an implied thing of like we're not the testing tool that you think we are. And this might be kind of ruffle some feathers, but there's a certain level of like, I'm not this is
Right.
kind of like the Selenium committers are telling me this, that this is the focus of the project, right?
Yeah.
If you want the all batteries included version, you have to go and assemble it from a bunch of different stuff. I'm saying, hey, Playwright has already done that. They packaged it up, batteries included, made a nice, perfect bundle, and Vibium is going to be that, but on the like WebDriver standards based, not Microsoft controlled
On a better engine,
version of the
pretty
world.
much. Yeah, like on the
Right,
perfect engine.
but building on the WebDriver BiDi, like we're building on very intentionally the WebDriver BiDi engine. I'm building a truck built
Right.
on the WebDriver BiDi engine. That's the thing.
Um,
But with the batteries included stuff and a lot of AI stuff built into that as
oh
well.
yeah, I've sewn it. So I've tried it a little bit. Um, One thing that I've maybe noticed that it's very still early in the age. Like I mean, V1 and going forward is going to improve. But what I use Playwright a lot. What I like about Playwright and Vibium, you just npm install kind of a thing. But
Yes,
also
yes.
it comes with out of the box kind of Playwright was out of the box examples, and like you can just hit run and it will run. Vibium is
Right,
not there yet,
right.
but out of the box you have like a almost out of the box you have a prompt that you can talk to and it will go and automate, and it's also a cool thing. So you're like closing this AI gap, which
Right,
I guess Playwright tried to do with MCP servers, but
right,
um,
right.
there. And from what I understand, MCP servers are hard to scale. It's expensive and time wise and token wise. And if you have a different solution that will be AI solution and that is cheap and fast, that would be amazing.
Right. So the it's kind of like I posted something yesterday. It's a bit apparently a spicier take than I guess I intended, but there's kind of like if Playwright and Selenium are effectively legacy tools, and they were created for humans, and Vibium is this is kind of like my marketing positioning here is like this is intended to there's a phrase of agent experience, right? So we're optimizing for agents writing the code. We're optimizing for Claude Code and Lovable. Like that's the thing. We still have to make an amazing developer experience because not everyone is going to go all in on Claude Code. Either they don't want to or they can't or whatever. They still want to like, or you might have your AI writing the traditional tests, right? The legacy tests, whatever. But there's a lot of people know the user experience or developer experience acronym. The AX, agent experience, that's kind of a new thing. And I think that's kind of what I'm bleeding into. That has like the so what factor of that is the token use between these various tools. There's some early data that's out there, but I'm going to have to like go back, into my workshop and like do a lot more analysis, do a lot more benchmarking to kind of make sure that this is kind of teased out. But that does have these implications of like, what are the defaults? We need to have a good user default experience. So out of the box, it's just ready to go. Very few setup things that you have to worry about. But that also means we have to even more so do that for the agent experience. So if you're hooking these things up to various AI tools, we have to make sure that we're optimizing for if AI comes to your documentation and tries to figure it out. Like you're already starting to see this in projects. There's like 2 sections in the READMEs for humans and for agents. You're now starting to see that. Like people are making 2 versions of their documentation specifically talking to the robots that are reading the documentation. Not every project is like globbed onto that, and I'm kind of saying like that's the thing that you have to focus on. Whatever. Apologize, I'm kind of rambling here, but there's I was also within this process like kind of a skeptic to the MCP server specifically, but we did a listening tour last couple of months, and a lot of people get value out of MCP. So I shipped with that as part of the core part of the Vibium. At the same time, this industry is moving so fast, and some people, MCP is so last year, and it's all about skills. And the reason to move from MCP to skills because it's all about optimizing and reducing the amount of context bloat and how much the LLMs are like thrashing around and wasting tokens just trying to find an answer. So it's all about trying to find the most efficient way to get an AI to do the thing or answer a question without wasting a bunch of stuff. And a lot of the existing tools, they didn't have that concern on day one because they were trying to optimize for like, well, we need to give a lot of information back to the humans that are reading the results. So a lot of debugging information, a lot of telemetry, a lot of summarization of stuff that may or may not be useful to an AI. excuse me, to an AI running these things. So anyway, I hope that all that makes sense. But
Yep,
there's a
yep,
certain level,
yep,
like there's a new world. Specifically, it's like the Claude code. It's the agentic dev loop.
yep.
Like really zeroing in on making sure that there's really good sane defaults for making that awesome, and then under the hood making it like faster, right? So if Chrome DevTools and Puppeteer and Playwright under the hood they were using WebSockets and it was like a faster experience that was like just it was just better under the hood. We're looking at that the same kind of thing. If you're now if agents or Claude Code or whatever is writing your tests, we now have the same incentive to like we have
Yep.
to optimize under the hood for that to be the fastest thing and the most correct thing to make it so the AI can write the code and test the code as fast as it can.
Yeah, I'm under impression, like maybe from AI use in general, that the future of AI is not LLMs. It's more like small language models that specifically trained on a specific task and is shipped with a specific product. So maybe Vibium would be that thing that we have this thing under the hood. It's not expensive, pretty cheap, but it's very pre-trained just to do the
Right.
testing. Yeah.
Yeah, there is an argument. Again, it goes back to the bundling and unbundling thing of like when the iPhone first came out, it was just one iPhone, and then over time, you now actually have. Actually, I kind of saw this in some of the projects I had access to with Tapster. People were making custom versions of Android touchscreens for very specific purposes, like HVAC systems touchscreens would be like one example. It's Android under the hood, but like it's no longer just a generic phone. It's like one specific use case. Similar thing. You have generic LLMs, and actually there's a bunch of different reasons for this. One, if you optimize it, it'll like be for one task. Let's say it's just trained on user interface widgets. There's already a couple of models that are out there just trained on user interfaces, which means you can delete from the training set anything that was trained on like cats and dogs and zebras and tigers and bears, right? Or whatever. It can be a smaller thing, but it can be a better one. The other kind of what do you call it pressure there is that it then can also it can fit on cheaper hardware. So I think one of the frustrating things of like all of these language models that are landing, there's so many different variations. It's a constant moving target of like just tell me what computer I need to have to run that on this, right? So there's some minimum amount of GPU power, some minimum amount of RAM. There's now a massive, at least as of today, a huge RAM shortage, which is driving prices. So there's a certain level of like, for this to be a successful project, I would like this to be as best as it can be, but I don't want to have to tell people you need to go buy this $10,000 NVIDIA card as like that is the minimum entry fee to play around with Vibium for free. I would love for this to be running on like a Raspberry Pi with very minimal RAM requirements. The implication there is then like testing out smaller trained models that don't have high RAM requirements. So right now, V1, it's just trained on Claude code that's tied to the cloud, and who knows how much RAM is required behind the scenes. But for this to be a successful open source project, there needs to be a good reference implementation that you can run locally and not on crazy expensive hardware. So that's going to be one of those things that we look at, like which models do we optimize for, and then also putting out guidance on like here's the absolute minimum hardware that you need to still have a good experience. And that we're like really early days on, right? I haven't done the experiment on. I have played around with like Qwen 3 VL32B. That's a pretty good open weights model, but I haven't had a chance to like specifically try that with Vibium.
I got a couple more questions left, if you're okay with that. So one of them is the future of QA and AI. So you vibe coded Vibium 0.1. I vibe coded, not even using cloud, but just MCP and like prompts and Copilot with LLM. My landing page, alexusadays.com, where there's like a training session where you can practice automation for login and like list items, deleting and adding like a little trainer for automation pretty much. But I did it in a matter of 3 hours. So pretty easy. So it's really easy to create apps. But that creates a huge gap in testing. And then like there's things that models don't get right, and unless you intervene manually, and if you don't know, you don't
Right.
know, so you ship
Right.
then things that are broken. Like,
Right.
what's gonna happen in 2-3 years? Are we gonna have a slop stuff all over the place, or how is it gonna impact AI? What's the future of testing? Was that like, what are we?
So I think it's going to be like things are going to be like what's the phrase? The more things change, the more they stay the same is I think the summary. I'm already kind of seeing this right now. So just in the last 30 days. So I started development of Vibium on December 11th. I was kind of going for like a advent of code kind of a thing. I was gearing up for shipping by Christmas. That was my goal. December 1st through the 10th, I was like getting a little nervous, like, oh shoot, I missed it. I didn't start the project on the 1st. Anyway, I finally got to like the 10th or 11th. I vibe coded a very long implementation plan on the 10th. And on the 11th, I was like convinced myself of like I got it down to a 14-day implementation plan that looked like every day's worth of work was a reasonable chunk of work that would get me to a release by Christmas. So I did that. I followed it every day. I shipped something and it was great. Shipped on Christmas. I then it was then the holidays. I did one extra thing I pulled from the V2 roadmap. Oh, that was the other thing. Classic agile development. Everything that I wanted to do was too much to be able to ship in 2 weeks. So there was a whole bunch of stuff that I jettisoned that was called V2. That was just stuff I could not fit in the 2 weeks thing. That's how you ship on time in agile is you reduce scope, right? So I moved a bunch of stuff. The one thing I did, and now this becomes a theme, like I'm shipping big things on right before major holidays. I shipped the Python bindings on New Year's Eve, right? I haven't touched the code since then. So now we're January 15th. And I haven't really, I mean, there's things I've been doing behind the scenes, talking to a lot of people and doing a whole bunch of other project related stuff that I can't talk about just yet, but not on console doing coding stuff. And I'm starting to feel like, okay, I can't do that any longer. I can't go another month not touching the code. There's a thing though that I think I'm going to experiment with this. Maybe this is like news, like right after this, I'll probably like get into this mode where the second half of the month is code. And I do all the vibe coding stuff and it's just like YOLO, I'm just doing the thing, right? And then a whole bunch of code just got created, ship it by the end of the month. And then you spend the first half of the next month just dealing with the carnage of what you just did 2 weeks prior, right? So a lot of people are accusing vibe coding stuff of just creating tons of slop, tons of technical debt. There's just like too much, right? Was it tested enough? You have to kind of do code reviews where there's security holes, all kinds of stuff.
Have you
So there's a kind of
considered beta staging it?
yeah, I think there's an old idea that I think I might apply to this, where if you look at the early days, I think Ubuntu was really good about standardizing a release process. Before Ubuntu changed their version numbers, it's kind of like an old idea, but like it was kind of a new idea 20 years ago when they did this. Their version numbers are the name of the year dot the name of the number, sorry, the number of the year and dot the number of the month that they released on it. And they made a promise to everybody that we are shipping every 6 months. That was a new concept. Before that, it was like, well, it's ready when we're ready. Even on the Selenium project, Simon would joke that we're going to ship by Christmas, but I'm not going to tell you what year, right? That was like the joke, right? But Ubuntu standardized this no matter what, expect a new release every 6 months. I think that would be a good thing to inherit with these tools. I see a lot of kids these days. There's a couple other tools that are doing some things that are similar to Vibium, and they're just releasing 1,000 new things every day. They're just running. They have their agents running 24/7, and they're just shipping stuff, and they're sitting back and checking in what they're doing. My hunch, and I'm just going to try this out. It will probably change my mind in a month. That it might be good to have a cadence where every month on the 25th, maybe, or the end of the month, whatever, we're shipping a new version of Vibium, but it's because the last 2 weeks of the month we're doing a bunch of vibe coding stuff, but the first 2 weeks of the month we are collecting all the reports, we're looking at pull requests, we're looking at like things we didn't quite get right or the AI didn't get quite right. We're just doing a whole bunch of processing. So kind of like a 2 weeks of dealing with tech debt and 2 weeks of vibe coding and do that every month. And so every month then you have a new version and then slotting that into, if you want to have like, beta
Stable.
production ready. So maybe it's like January is the messy thing, February is like the beta release, and maybe by March, basically the third release of going through this cycle 3 times. Maybe that's the version that is like we can reasonably tell people like, okay, you can trust that, right? I could see that potentially working. Maybe at least like it might have to be that way when it's like literally just me on a project. I've got paperwork things I have to do, and then there's like coding things I have to do, and maybe I slice my schedule up so it's like first half of the month, second half of the month. But you can kind of see like basically that's not a new idea. That's an old idea I'll be taking from Ubuntu, but instead of doing it one release every 6 months, once a month, that might not be fast enough in this AI world that we're in. Maybe it's like I have to do that every 2 weeks.
Can we tie it up to the question of the future of QA, that at some point we're going to get to a cadence where AI release comes in stages with kind of work in progress, messed up, fix it up, beta and stable version too, so we don't get too much slop released all the time?
I think there's another, what's the other phrase? Back to the future. A lot of people are saying that the ideas around Agile and XP are the only durable things that last now. You have, we call it acceptance testing,
user acceptance.
Basically, like you have the thing that we said were really important about like having really good tests, lots of tests, constant continuous integration, like all of these things are actually even that much more important. So it's kind of like if you ignored having a good build system and lots of unit tests, like now is the time to actually go back and dust off those XP books written by Martin Fowler and Kent Beck and all that stuff like that, like on how to do Agile programming. Those are still important because now it's not, but the difference is it's not a human writing the tests and looking at the dashboard of what broke and trying to fix it. The AI is going through that loop. But it needs to have, you need to give it that structure of like, here's our code in the source control, here's our list of bugs, here's our list of features that we want to implement, here's our unit tests, go. All of those things are how a well-run project from 20 years ago, like Agile programming is like a really old idea. And if you forget all of the overpriced consultants kind of just wasting your time with like morning stand-ups, if you just focus on the technical practices of like continuous integration, lots of unit testing, frequent releases, those things are still good and actually even more important. So it's like the future of testing and QA is actually something that is like an old idea from literally 20 years ago, right? Like run a good, tight, agile, lowercase agile. Don't let the overpriced consultants ruin it. Just like focus on the good, frequent releases, lots of automation. That's the future, which is also the past. So that's my riff on that.
The QA will become some sort of like orchestrator of AI testing and kind of in AI
the specific
driven
job,
thing.
Right. The only thing that is left for the humans to do, but again, that's even still prompts that the like, what do you call it? If you look at the R1 the roadmap for Vibium itself, there's like the things to implement and the acceptance criteria. Those two things actually, like I gave it some high level, here's the things I want to do, and here's what success looks like binaries that do this, inputs and outputs. It created the 14-day plan based on that, of like, okay, breaking that out, each day has its own goals and its own acceptance criteria. So at some level, humans are writing very high level like design docs and kind of acceptance criteria that then gets translated to the AIs at some point, right? That like flesh that out. But at the end of the day, you still, a human is still just determining what they want to see as an end result. There's also kind of an aspect of the job where I use this metaphor where if the classic SDET kind of a role is you're in a warehouse and you're moving boxes from left to right, you're writing whatever, metaphorically. Your job now moves to being on a balcony looking down at the warehouse, watching all the robots do the things, which means your hand is potentially on the big red button that stops everything because something can get out of control. And you're like, whoa, hold on a second. Everything's broken. You see these videos of robots just doing crazy stuff like that. Like they don't realize they've got a box attached to the back. Like everything is it's spiraling. So a person to literally just like monitor the factory and stop it when something bad happens and fixing it, right? or just like monitoring to make sure that you're doing the right things. Because you could have a purely automated system do a thing, and then you realize, hold on a second, it's going in a completely different direction. That's not what we want to do. You have to like stop and retarget it. So the job either moves to be kind of looking more like what, maybe if you were in an SDET, maybe looking like more like what your manager was doing. So now like the future of the job is like you're kind of competing with your manager for that job of managing, but you're not managing humans, you're managing developers, or managing, sorry, the
AI.
robots, or you're just part of the dev team and you're just like, you're running your own kind of vibe coding loop on some part of the project, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting where we're going to. Well, and last big thing of today that I think QA industry is struggling right now, and I see it everywhere. So more and more products launching some sort of AI that provides non-deterministic outputs. It's kind of like here and there in terms of the advices is given back and providing like output on like some regulations or whatever, how to follow through.
Yeah.
And then QA is really bad with testing non-deterministic stuff. There are some tools in place that existed a long time before just for LLM testing itself on the like developing LLM level. And then, for example, like prompt foo, you'll have other agents testing the responses of your agent, your AI, and giving it like a percentage success kind of a thing, like 96 good, less than 80 fail kind of a thing, like matching the outcome. None of the modern testing automation tools doing it. Like Zero, where you like kind of Playwright out of the box, install, give it a couple prompts where it's a good match, a couple prompts where it's a bad match, and run against it on your like UI AI output in the UI. No one's doing it. It's a big pain, and a lot of QA kind of considering how we switch into that mode where you can test AI with non-deterministic outputs. None of the modern tools have it. Will Vibium have something like this? Is it possible to have a bunch of prompts for the AI and like give a percent success for the output it sees in your product?
So I'll answer that. So it's kind of two ways. Like one, right now, that's not my focus. There's in the sense of some people call it like we're in like the horseless carriage version of AI test or AI tools. It reminds me of also the early days of the film industry, where before they took the film camera out into the world and films like nature and cars and streets, they brought the camera into a theater and just filmed actors on a stage, because what else would you do? Like, so there's a certain level of like, right now what we're doing is applying testing tools, adding an AI, but like using AI to test it like still a human driven development process. I'm not sure if I heard that phrase, human driven development, but anyway, of like
built in AI into the process.
Right, but it's still like there's code and then you need to test the code.
Right.
But I'm not testing it. I'm using a prompt to test something that was not an AI, right? Like I'm not using AI to test AI. I'm using AI to test a touchscreen or a light switch, right?
Human interface.
So in that case, like I can kind of like punt on the question, if you will. Like I'm not designing it with that intention. However, there is something slightly similar. This has happened twice. One was like my interview question at Google. I still remember it because like I didn't know if this was the answer, but it seemed like it was a correct enough of an answer at the time that at least they didn't kick me out. And also I've seen it fast forward a couple of years later, where in my own testing for my own project that I was working on recently, it was all, how do you test a random number generator? Like you said, non-deterministic outputs. Forget the AI part of it. If you were just literally the developer of a random number generator, how do you guarantee that when you run the function, it gave you a random number? My Google interview answer was, let's say you actually make a graph of, you make it so the random number generator, you limit it so it either can give a 0 or a 1. And then if it does a 0 or 1, you literally use that to paint a picture of literally just a black and white image of 0 or 1. And so at the end, you will have an image that, whatever your dimensions are, of white pixels and black pixels. And then let's say you run it 1,000 times, and half the picture should be white and half the picture should be black. Statistically, if it's a random number generator, it should be equal. So you could visually look at it to see, like, you basically if it's random in the moment, it's going to look like a speckled, it's going to look speckled. You then sort it into 0 and 1, or you don't even have to sort it. You just literally sum up the zeros, sum up the ones. They should be, within some margin of error, 50-50, right? There's a bunch of different ways to do that. So you can deterministically to test non-deterministic outputs by running it 1,000 times in a row and figuring things out. Granted, a random number generator is way different than an LLM that can literally produce the works of Shakespeare or something like that, right?
Yep.
So there's another aspect to this. This is not the Google interview, but this is something that I noticed in the default behavior of the random number generator in the NIM programming language. It's a very specific niche thing. For various reasons, I was doing this thing. I needed a random number generator. It was like to create like the hash sum thing. But there's this seed that you give it. And if you give it the same seed every time, it will always give you the same number. Even though it's a random number generator, there's a way, because you have to test it. Sorry, if I can make my point here. You have this library that spits out these outputs, and that has to get like plumbing. You have to connect it to a whole bunch of stuff, right? Just to make sure that like end to end, you put something in and something comes out, regardless of what the input is. You just need to verify that inputs produce outputs, and it, has a chain of things where something comes out and nothing blew up, right? The way you test that works, there's like an end-to-end test. Even though you're testing something that when it's real live in production, it's non-deterministic, just to make sure that the plumbing works, is you configure that, let's say the random number generator, so it always spits out the number 1 or always spits out the number 2. Like you give it a particular seed. So then when you're kind of like, the intention for this particular test is that you're just making sure that everything is connected properly. You change, like you're kind of like, it's classic scientific method. You're reducing your variables. So in that particular case, you're configuring the random number generator to spit out the number 1 every time, because the goal of that test is just to make sure all the plumbing works. So that is my answer. A very complicated way of saying there's one aspect of testing that whatever AI tool chatbot that you are creating, I think this is one of the settings. You configure it so when you say, write me a poem, it always spits out the exact same poem every time. You configure it so it is deterministic, because for a plumbing test, inputs lead to outputs and then nothing blows up. That is like one aspect of testing. The other one is you would still want to constrain it. So like in my Google interview thing, where like you're just asking it for ones and zeros. So you might have to like making it so it's limited. It's still random, but it's limited in what it can spit out. And this would be easier in kind of a configured for math problems, because that then is easier to prove. But you could constrain it to maybe just Shakespearean sonnets or something like that, where you kind of like a limited set, and then you run it 10,000 times and can verify. You did the first test where the plumbing works. Now you want to test the non-determinism of it. You use some specific model that is like kind of random, but constrained, and you verify that it is appropriately doing random stuff, right? Basically, you have to. There's no one technique. There's no one tool. You'd have to like literally like think of it of like, how do I verify one thing? Like it's literally scientific method, old school stuff, right? Like one variable and constrain and make constant everything else. You're gonna have like a set of testing techniques on how you would do that. That's how I would approach it. But also, I'm not doing that in Vibium V1. So
why I asked about Vibium? Because you have an AI built in, and how prompt foo is testing, you have an output, non-deterministic output. You have other LMS agents running against that output with a similar output with some keywords, and then it gives, it analyzes it against the data it has and gives some percentage of success rate. Like this good, pretty good, we can go through, and this looks bad, this is not a good result. This, like the capital of, it says capital of USA is New York. Okay, this is clearly wrong, right? Kind of a thing. So if you have an AI agent already, why not have some sort of a training JSON, like, hey, in this test, here's the keywords, here's the phrase, compare this stuff against what you see non-deterministic response on the screen, kind of a thing. You know, it seems that it would have been easier than kind of trying to integrate like prompt foo and playwright together and just think, how can I test this non-deterministic
I think that
thing?
there's also I guess it's basically kind of the cheat code is to take the pure non-determinism and find a way to make some part of it deterministic.
Right.
I also heard from another founder, they were working on this stuff. I asked them like, how are you dealing with the randomness of the outputs? They said they try to force it so you always give the AI multiple choice test. So regardless of what it could do, you only give it 4 options and it has to choose, like you force it to produce 4 options, and then you tell it to only choose from one of those 4. And that kind of keeps the guardrails on there. That might be a good idea anyway, but that also might be an inclination of how you test these things. I apologize, I'm not specifically familiar with prompt foo specifically as a tool, but there is kind of a way that you can approach, and if nothing else, you can kind of steal the ideas from how you test random number generators in a way on how you test any other thing that's non-deterministic. I think the other big rant that I have here, brief rant, is that we have to get comfortable with the fact that the world is non-deterministic. And the second you have a computer talking to another computer over a network, and even if it's just one, and also just a phone, has certain level of battery levels. It has its own kind of end of life of like how effective things are, like its quality of its connection to the tower. There's so many variables at all times, almost like nothing can truly be deterministic unless you're like testing a virtual machine on one computer and you're doing like you're testing a little interpreter. But the nature of our job, when you're testing a web page and like it's served from a server and you've got 50 includes from different other servers, like it's just the nature of the beast that it's kind of like the TCP IP platform, like the protocol. It succeeded at a very extremely lower level because it baked into the assumptions of the network protocol that the network is flaky, things can get delivered out of order, some things don't get delivered. It's built into the, hey, if I didn't get something, can I have something back?
There's mechanism built in with TCP IP where it lost packets, it will actually ask for them and receive them.
So I think the future of the projects, this is actually one of the reasons why I changed out the orange wristband on my watch, is like literally it's this reason. We've been so focused on binary results, pass, fail, green, red. And this is like a deterministic worldview. Things like you get mad if the test ran twice in a row and it failed. It's flaky. It's annoying, right? We shouldn't be surprised. It's actually, I think the testing tools are telling us that the world sucks and is flaky, and we should be basically, orange is the color of orange safety cones. When you have a detour that gets in your way, you don't just crash your car into a tree and complain that like, well, there's that pothole got in my way, that orange safety cone got in my way, so I can't go to the store. Like, no, you follow the detour signs and you route around it and you just like go get to your destination. In the real world, like there are orange safety cones get popped up and get in your way all the time. I think we have to kind of reconcile the fact that the world, everything is non-deterministic, and orange is going to be, you have green results, red results, and then you have the orange test results, which is like, it kind of worked, but we had to take a detour, like to test that workflow. The AI had to jump in, and instead of just bombing it out, it had to like fix it to get to your result.
Right.
Some people would argue that like, well, if the AI had to jump in and fix something, you're actually masking problems that should not be masked. I would argue that as long as it's presented and surfaced to a dashboard where it shows, here are the things that kind of broke, but the AI fixed it, instead of looking at that going like, that the orange test results are the flaky tests, you could look at it as like, wow, I'm so thankful that the AI fixed it. So we kind of sort of have the result that the checkout flow works.
Right.
But that means we have to go fix it and try to move things to either be green or red. But orange is a full-fledged representation of the world is flaky, the world is non-deterministic. We kind of need to not live in a black and white, green and red, binary ones and zeros, deterministic world. It never was deterministic. Anyway, that's my biggest rant of everything, is that the world, the AIs are kind of showing us that the world was always probabilistic. It's now that much more so. You cannot, the genie's out of the bottle. We cannot force determinism out of all of this stuff. We can try, like my random number generator example, right? Like we can constrain it a little bit, but the world is probabilistic, and we
Right.
have to get used to that.
Right. We need to narrow down the probability to acceptable
Right, to
cases.
something you could measure. Right,
Right.
I think
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can never understand
Awesome. Well, Jason, thank you so much for this conversation. That was great. So I'll ask. Probably people are gonna have some questions. They'll post in the comments. So maybe if we'll compile like a good list, we'll have like some follow up on this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, that's great. And yeah, I mean, people can um, find me on LinkedIn, or there's the website or
I'll
GitHub,
put
all the
the
socials.
yeah in the description. I'll put all the links so they can find Vibium, download it,
Yeah,
and start testing.
cool. All right. Well, thanks for your time.
Yep. Thank you.